Welcome, Pete Court.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Haven Writers Guild today.
My pleasure. Lovely to be here and all that.
So you are the author of Suburban Tales.
I am, yes.
But you are also a lecturer at
Yes.
Table Adelaide. You work at Adelaide's 107.9 Life FM.
That's the one.
So you have your fingers in many pies.
Multiples, yes. And still studying myself.
And still studying, yes? You're
Still.
doing a PhD?
That's the one, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So, and sometimes having a social life, perhaps?
Rarely, but
Rarely,
yes. Yes. Actually, I coach hockey at
in
district
your
level.
free time?
Yeah. Which
Excellent.
is actually really quite relevant. It's actually rather pertinent
Is it
because
really?
well, everything else I do is writing and creative based.
Mm-hmm.
And coaching is just getting out and basically control understanding other people, and it's outside of me, which
And
is
it's
wonderful.
physical too,
and
so-
it's physical,
yeah.
yeah. So it's actually really important to have that, yeah. And I find that it's great social interaction because you have to interact with people, whereas, you know, if you're just studying and lecturing and writing, it's all in here.
Yeah. That's an interesting
it's
point.
all about yourself and your own thinking, and that's just a really stupid place to live.
Oh, yeah.
For everyone, not just for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about Suburban Tales. Congratulations on getting it published.
Thank you.
It's amazing, and the word I would use to describe it is gripping, because I couldn't put it down,
Oh, okay.
which is a good thing.
Okay.
Can you tell us a bit about it?
Not really.
Okay.
It's a weird collection. It actually started out, the first story in it is about a serial murders, a
Yes.
series of murders, and it was actually originally called Dark Eater, and it was basically people being killed by something that they couldn't see. And the more I sort of worked through it and felt it was a really nice metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what for, I'm not going to tell you, you have to make it up yourself. But it was also fun. It was a lot of fun to write a really gruesome, grotesque horror murder story thing,
Yeah.
but to have these fun, fantastical bits in it, like the priest who stars on the cover, who's actually a whale.
Yes, a
It
beluga
just
whale.
seemed
Yes.
fun to have that in there, but also, as I wrote it, it just sort of fell into this thing that this whale was going to be quite unique, because in order to solve a mystery that wasn't human, you needed some other force that was inhuman to explain it, and so it sort of all made a lot of sense, and
Wow.
it just sort of fell into place. And then the other two stories are very, very different, but also ended up having a similar thread to it of things going wrong in an inexplicable way.
Yeah.
But then there being an explanation, sort of. Which
Did
is
you
kind of
write all
fun.
three of them around the same time? Or
No, very much. The first one was written very much in advance. The second story about the musician was actually the last one I wrote.
Okay.
But that was the easiest because it was based on a girl who I knew, who I'd worked with. I'd produced her album and had written some music with her. And it's about a woman who has a really good music career and is a great songwriter and very passionate person. And so I was able to use her
Yeah.
as a sort of a template for that. Then when I'd written it, I actually went to her and said, "Hi, I've written this story. Can you just check it to make sure it makes sense?" Because,
Yeah.
you want it to sort of be internally logical, if not externally. And externally it's not logical, so... and she loved it and actually ended up writing a song about the story, which you can actually
brilliant.
get free from the website when you get the book.
Wow.
So it's actually on the publisher's website actually has the song that she wrote about that story, which is kind of cool.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, it was kind of fun the way it all fell together. But it was weird. All three stories have these really strange things going on, but I still had to research them
Yeah.
to make sure they were right. Like the first one about the murder mystery sort of thing. I have a very good friend who's a forensic scientist, and she read it and said, yeah, it's really weird. You're a sick man. But technically speaking, at the murder scene, this wouldn't happen because ... So I was actually able to go back and fiddle those little things. It's kind of cool, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you're writing something really bizarre, and when you're writing something really ridiculously outrageous, the little details have to be right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the big details don't make sense either.
That's right. You need to anchor it.
Yeah.
I'll put that there.
Which was really weird. Yeah. Got that? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was actually going to ask you, because you make several references to locations around Adelaide.
Yeah.
why did you want to base it? I mean, obviously you live in South Australia, but
Yeah.
you could have really put it anywhere.
Yeah.
What was it? What was the significance?
Just because they were places that I felt comfortable with, not just that I knew, but I felt comfortable with. The church in the murder mystery one, the first one where the priest works, is called St. Theodora's or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually in my mind, and when I was writing it was
Yeah.
actually St. George's at McGill, which is where I went to church for a long time. And so to have the physical picture of the church with the graveyard behind it, and the buildings in my head when I was writing it, just made it real.
Yeah.
And any details that happened to pop in would just go in there. So it was written about a real place.
Yeah.
And again, if you're doing something ridiculously outrageous, and all fiction is fake, the more reality you have, the better the fake balances against it. So yeah, it just had to be places that I knew and understood. And I think I too wanted to look at any city, but Adelaide particularly, and how we are. And so I kind of had to set it in Adelaide because I wanted to know what we're like.
As a society, or?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. And as I say, all three of the stories are very, very different, but they all touch on different aspects of it. Like the last story is very much a family drama, if you like, with family relationships and stuff, based around the city and the suburbs, and what the suburbs are like was really central to that.
Yeah, I loved your description of Noarlunga because I'm quite familiar with it, and it was just a really great contrast of what it used to be like and what it's like now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, my mum and dad used to have a holiday place down at Noarlunga, and now you don't have holiday places. You live there. You know, it's now suburbia.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And then there's in the last story, the family lives out the other side of town. I imagine like out past Salisbury, Elizabeth, on the very edges where people go either because they can't go anywhere else, or they're sort of, it's the end of almost the city, is the feeling. And because that's sort of what's happening with the family, it's a really nice place to put it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, beautiful. So can you talk about where your writing journey began? When did you start to write?
I have no idea.
Okay. Is it
That's
something you feel
gone
like you've always, have you always been creative writing, or do you think it's something you did as an adult?
I've always wanted to, because I've always read.
Because you started in TV?
I started in TV when I was in high school, actually. I was actually on a national television show when I was still trying to do Year 12, which is my excuse for miserably failing Year 12. So I was in television then. So I was telling stories, but not writing stories. So it was a different process. And then I spent a long time in radio and in advertising, ran advertising agencies and did a lot of advertising. That's storytelling.
Yeah.
But it's really crystallised, 30 seconds, tell the story, entertain, all that sort of stuff. So, I guess I've always sort of been doing that. But it was never like, I just needed to escape the hurt of my earth. No, but which is a valid point for many people. I know I work a lot with comedians as well, and that's often there. I was picked on at school and I reacted by making the bullies laugh, sort of thing. It was never any of that sort of thing. I just always have been fascinated by telling stories and have been surrounded by novels and reading and study as well, unfortunately. And it's just something that just seems natural. It's kind of a weird. I've always been surrounded by musicians as well, and I know a lot of like prominent musicians who've said, "Well, isn't everyone a musician?"
Really?
Because they grow up in a household surrounded by musicians.
Wow.
And when you're a writer, you grow up in a household surrounded by writers. So your children will go, "Doesn't everyone write novels?"
Yeah.
My parents were both psychologists, so they were always studying and they were always researching and they were always, they were always talking about these things. And so
you grew up saying, isn't everyone crazy?
I grew up needing a psychologist. No. Yeah, well, exactly. There's a lot of understanding that everybody's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. Yeah, so I guess it's sort of what you grow up surrounded by, and part of the journey of that book was looking at what we take for granted because isn't this the way things are?
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't everybody live in a wealthy, fabulous city that's, full of people who don't want for food? Isn't that what everything's like? That book doesn't look at that, but that's the sort of thing that I want to pick on, the things that you just take for granted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you do sit down to write? Is it more of a spontaneous thing, or do you actually have a process? Okay, I'm going to sit down and write this now.
Interesting you should ask. Good question.
Thank you.
No, it is a good question. I've just been, in fact, just half an hour ago, talking about a new course that we're going to be teaching here soon about surviving creativity, and it really looks deeply and intimately at the creative process as being a bipolar curve, if you will, where creativity happens in a manic state, where you basically, and anyone who's written or performed will know that feeling of sitting down and just everything flows, and then the depression afterwards, which is true. And part of the what we're finding, what this course is going to be looking at, is the fact that's perfectly natural. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, if you can understand that and you can learn to use that, and I've realised over 4 years of having decades producing and performing breakfast radio at a very high level and being constantly bang 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 creative first thing in the morning, and then getting to the end of the show, and I hadn't realised it. I was quiet afterwards because I was just in that depressed stage. Yeah. Not depressed, but not depressive, but depressed, like just subdued stage. And it was like, I wasn't physically exhausted, wasn't even necessarily mentally exhausted, just suppressed. So what I've found with my writing is that when I have that manic state, is to create and to just jot notes, because often I won't be able to spend the time writing. Yeah. So what I'll do is, like every writer, have notebooks, write down the notes, jot down a whole scene or a whole idea or something just on a scrap of paper or something handy, and then keep that, and then disciplined to say, okay, I'll get up at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'll have breakfast, get ready for the day, then I will go out for an hour, find a coffee shop, and I'll sit down and I will write that stuff. So balancing that manic creative phase with the need to actually live a life in the world, and to actually have a 9-to-5 job or whatever. So to understand that I can take the idea and it will still be good tomorrow when it's not fresh. Yeah. And in fact, I will have had time to think about it, and I can now actually use the technical skills of writing, not just the manic creative side. So yeah, over the years, I've accidentally, it turns out, learned to be able to pick that up and to do that, to control it. And now, like this afternoon, I'll go on radio and I'll be absolutely boring and quiet and dull at 12 o'clock. And then at 1 o'clock, as soon as the show starts, I will actually not choose to, but I will actually kick into a different gear, and it will become a much sharper, faster thinking. I'll actually feel my brain gear up. It's really weird. Wow. Yeah. So hopefully I'm training myself now to be able to do that as a writer, to say, okay, I'm going to write tomorrow for an hour, and I'm going to jot down my notes because this is what I want to do, okay? Yeah. So I don't have to necessarily get up at 2 in the morning in that manic state and write until 6 the next morning and have my children going, oh my God, I need to go to school. I'm going, shut up, I'm writing. All of that stuff that destroys relationships, destroys families, and wears you out very quickly. So I don't know, we'll see how it goes. Yeah. But I've kind of written like that, with that disciplined mania, if you will. Yeah, that's brilliant. Which is very frustrating, sitting around just going, oh God, I can't write until tomorrow. Come on, come on. But again, it's discipline. They're very valuable for doing your PhD as well, because you would need to use the same. Yeah, exactly. I have to put aside an hour to do this research bit. Yeah. Okay. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, has anything surprised you about being a writer as opposed to, do you feel like radio and TV is such a very different arena, and that writing is there anything about writing that's been different? Yeah. Actually, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought of it in that relational context before, but yeah, I'm thinking as I answer. That's okay. With radio and TV and advertising and even performance presentation, or less so, but certainly with radio and television, when I sit down to do the show, television more so, it's done before you get there, sort of thing. You're operating a machine almost. So you decide, and like a commercial is a good example, like a 30-second commercial, you have to do it, and it has to do this stuff mechanically. Yeah. It has to achieve something. So that's set. And the inspiration will come, and there'll be a great idea. And With radio, again, I know I have certain content that I have to create, and so that's a cellular thing almost, and I create that, and then I put it on the radio. Quite often, the process of actually speaking it out, if you will, and performing that on the radio will change what happens, and that's fantastic. That's why I do the job, because it's great fun. Yeah. But to actually write, to get the notes and say, okay, I'm going to write that chapter, to get down the next day and then start writing the chapter, and you go, and it goes off on its own way, and it goes over here somewhere, and then I'll look back in a week's time and go, oh, that's what that meant.
Yeah.
You know, and to be able to trust yourself, I guess, to throw out things into the process that I have no idea where they're coming from. It's very much that moment where God, well, not that moment, that place where God is in control of it. Because it's like, oh, I would love to have a whale. Wouldn't it be so cool if you had a whale that could do all this? Okay, yeah, all right, I'll put him in there. What's he going to do? I don't know.
Yeah.
What is the point of the whale? I don't know. And then, 2 months later he goes, oh, so that's what the whale's doing in there. You know, that's fantastic. And with a novel, that happens over a long period of time, and little bits just come back. And when I used to write sitcom, I used to write sitcoms. I used to write a lot of comedy for ABC TV and stuff. And I was doing a lot of piloting and templates for sitcoms and for commercial TV. I would deliberately get to the end of a scene, knowing that it's going into a commercial break. And I would deliberately throw in something that was just a killer line, a great bit of comedy or a great scene, da-da, da-da, and end. And then get to the beginning of the next scene and go, I've had no idea how I'm going to follow that up.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the heck is going to happen. That was such a good scene, now I've got to make it make sense. That was cool. Yeah. Because it would eventually come. You go, okay. So that not waiting for inspiration, but driving it. Yeah. Making the inspiration have to come. And then when something happens, just letting that weird thing or that strange thing or that funny thing be and expect that it'll come back later. That's the best thing about writing comedy. With a radio show, that's still in there, but with a lot of other writing, the more technical side, it's not necessarily there. So, that's the difference. Yeah. Okay. But I love putting myself in that position where I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. Because if I don't, then the listener and the reader, they don't know. And that's cool. Yeah. We all get entertained together. Yeah. So what are you working on now in terms of writing? My PhD thesis, which is only a couple of novels. And I have another novel that I actually wrote long before that one that I've rewritten a couple of times and go back to, and I'm rewriting. And that's pretty much ready. Are they similar genre? Given that this one's not really in a genre... No, it is, because look, it says on the back. Yeah. Fantastical realism. It does say fantastical realism. Do you know how long we had to think of to come up with that? I do like it. It's myself and the publisher were going, what is it? It's not that. No, it's not that. Well, it's nice and vague and kind of mysterious. Yeah. It is. It is. Fantastical realism. Yeah, similar sort of stuff. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I have that. And I probably should do more short story stuff. Yeah, because I did a lot of short story when I was working on that. Did a lot of short stories for competition that I put in competitions all around the world, just for the sake of doing something different, trying a different thread. So I'd do a mystery story, or I'd do a straight comedy, or something much more emotive. Short stories tend to be a lot more realist generally, so they were a lot of fun. And I haven't done a lot of short story lately, and I should, because I enjoy it. Yeah. And it's very satisfying because, in a couple of days it's done. It's like it's finished and it's gone. It's kind of nice. Whereas this takes years. Yeah. So can I ask then, before we finish, what would be your dream project? I have no idea. Yeah. I don't know. No, that's okay. It's a big question. I don't know. And sometimes it doesn't happen. What's yours? Just to put some context on it, what's your dream project? God. You can't ask me questions. Says who? Well, I'd love to start my own writing community online and, get people involved and something like, I don't know. www.haven. Haven Writing. Yeah. No, I don't know. I'd love to get my novel published. Yeah. I love fantasy. I love writing children's books. So just actually being a writer is fun. I don't really have a dream project per se. Yeah, I like that. Was it Dorothy Lessing said, I like having written. I don't like writing, I like having written.
Exactly.
But I think, I agree with her a little bit, but I actually like that process of just being somewhere and just going, oh, that's a weird idea, let's do that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a weird idea, let's do that. I mean, I've got a number of ideas for really cool stories. I think, oh, that'd be so much fun, and you know, I'd love to get to that, but you know, it's a case of finding the time to actually do that, putting those ideas aside and going, hang on a second.
With the stories that the short stories that you write, do you ever look at them as possible shows because you've got that background?
I look at them as, I use them deliberately as character development often. Like a lot of the characters in there have been in short stories with different names in different environments, but it's just a case of, it's basically backstory for the characters so that I can create them and play with them and know who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, no, I don't know what a dream project, I think just keep doing it.
Yeah.
I just love the stupidness that comes out of them, out of writing. It's bizarre. I love it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for giving us your time today.
It's been my pleasure.
And all the best with your future.
And all the best with your dream of what was it?
www. Haven Writers Guild.
Yeah. I wonder if that'll ever happen.
Beautiful. Thanks, Pete.